you for everyone for joining us today as we focus on ruthless priorities. You are best positioned for success when you're able to focus on fewer things. I know this seems like common sense, but it's really hard sometimes to communicate clearly about your priorities. So we're going to talk about some tips today that you can actually put directly into action to help with that.
Jen,
So
when you said common sense, I thought you were going to say counterintuitive because when you're working on less, you're set up for success. And I'm guessing that other people on the call thought, oh, wait a sec, you are? I thought when you were doing more, you were set up for success. So
maybe
I
it
just
is
want to call out.
counterintuitive. I don't know. I feel like the more I can focus on fewer things, the better off I am, but I don't feel like I can focus on fewer things most of the time. So we'll talk about the culture of busyness as well as we dive into this. I do think this is a really important topic, though, and I will say it's taken me a long time to learn some of these lessons and get to the point where I feel okay saying no. So I'm Jen Weigel. I run a program management team at Microsoft, and I am here with my co-conspirator and co-creator, Naomi.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Naomi Margolis. I am an software engineer in the Excel Copilot world, which maybe is why I'm wearing green today, Jen, for Excel.
Oh, I was thinking I was wearing green for spring. But anyway, so in today's fast-paced work environment, it can be really easy to become overwhelmed by all of the competing demands. And with that, I think it can be easy as well to lose sight of what truly matters. Like, am I actually getting done the things that need to get done? So learning how to ruthlessly prioritize will help you concentrate your efforts on the tasks that can have the most significant impact on your career as well as your own professional growth. So in the next 50 minutes-ish, we're going to talk through a 5-step approach to ruthlessly prioritizing. It's not going to be easy. Prioritizing is not easy. Choosing which things to do, protecting that work, and getting it done takes a tremendous amount of work and of leadership, really. Doing this means that you're showing up as a leader. When you get it right, though, it is one of the best ways to feel saner. So for your own sanity, feel more in control, and to actually accomplish the important, useful things for your business. So the things that your boss and your boss's boss care about.
Yeah, Jen, can I jump in here? In case anyone's hearing this and starting to worry, like, wait a sec, I don't need more work. I don't have time or energy for more work. That's why Jen's also mentioning these are the benefits. Doing this does feel initially like more work, but it sets you up not only for all of the benefits, it helps with your career because when people start recognizing what you're able to deliver, this really sets your career for the next step, which is, the whole point of this series. And it helps you. So I just, in case anyone is hearing this and fearful that they don't have time or energy for more work, that's why we're getting into this. We're not just adding to your workload. We promise. We think long and hard about making sure that this is actionable so that you're able to take it and make improvements to your life and your work.
Absolutely. I thank you for putting that in there, Naomi, because I'm definitely not like, hey, do more. Let's give you some steps for you to take additional things to go do more.
You're not busy. Go do more.
That is not the goal at all. And I think that's the thing that's important because in the culture of being so busy all of the time, it's easy to get swept up by those things. But the key thing to remember is that we are not measured by how busy we are. We are measured by what we accomplish and the impact it has. And so while sometimes it can be tempting to be like, well, I got these 50 things done. I did these 50 activities, it's not about the activities. It's about the impact that they have. And it's better to do just 3 things or 2 things. I know this sounds really radical and get it done and have impact versus, well, I made progress on 50 things. So that's what we're going to talk more about today.
One of the things I tell my team is thinking about it like a basketball game. And the thing that's most important or interesting to a coach is how many points did you score? not how many times did you run up and down the court. And of course, running up and down the court helps contribute to the points that you've scored. But in the end, that metric, how many points you scored, is the one that is most important to your coach, to the players, to the fans. So keep that in mind too when you're thinking about, but wait a second, all of this, what does it accrue to? What does it lead to?
And I wish we could all hit that 3 point line all of the time and not have to run around. You can tell I didn't play organized sports because the sound of running back and forth doesn't sound appealing to me. But I really do appreciate that point, because what is it accumulating to? It can be so easy to just get caught in the constant do. And part of what we're going to talk about today is that ability to take a step back and be ruthless in the way that you're prioritizing, so that you don't just find yourselves getting caught in that grind. So a little bit of a story here. In July of 2022, so almost 2 years ago, my scope and my scale doubled. I suddenly found myself promoted to my organization's leadership team, and all of the program managers in the org were rolling up through me. And we were starting our fiscal planning. We had, I think, like 49 things that people, I did not have a team of 49, by the way, not even close. I think there were maybe 15 people on the team at that point. We had 49 things that people wanted us to get done in the next 6 months. 20 of them were deemed P0. If you have 20 P0s, can you really actually prioritize? And the remaining are below the line. And I was assessing capacity and all of that kind of stuff. And I went back to the leadership team and I said, okay, look, here are the things that I know we will commit to doing, we can do. I'm going to give you each 5 votes on what you think we should pull above the line. Help the team actually the leadership team make a decision, weigh in on, what else should do it. And it was really interesting because there were 2 comments in particular that I still remember, even though this was 2 years ago. One of them said, this is really hard.
Mhm.
This is really hard to decide, looking at the full list and the potential impact of each of these things. And another one said, yeah, it's hard. And we have never done it before. So that is why we get into trouble every single year, because someone says yes to everything,
Yeah.
and it gets dropped and it doesn't happen. So when you're prioritizing ruthlessly, it means that you're saying, we'll get these 2 things done. Or in the case of prioritizing for my team, we'll get these 15 things done, not all 59. You know me?
Jen, when you were going in, were you worried? Were you anxious? Were you fearful of sharing that message? Were you
I mean,
freaked out about
I
having
was
to
a
say
little
it?
bit, especially because this is a brand new leadership team. So here I walk in, we're still figuring things out, as far as like how we vibe as a team and how we make decisions. And I'm right off the bat saying, can't do all of the things that you'd like me to do. It
Yeah,
is.
that's a
It's super,
scary.
super nerve-wracking. It is. And
Yeah.
that's actually why I think the comments they made stick with me, because this is really hard. It is really hard to make these decisions. It's, and I think going in and saying, look, we'll do these things that made the cut no matter what. And we are not going to sacrifice on those priorities. That built credibility in doing that. It was okay if we didn't do all 49 things that were on the list. We committed to a much narrow number and we did it. We delivered on those. And then as we had time, we delivered on some of the other things, but not all of the things. But no matter what, we didn't put those very top ones at risk. And that
Wow,
builds credibility.
that's again so counterintuitive to hear that you saying no helped build credibility in a way that you wouldn't have had if you had said yes. I feel like that statement needs to be like a banner across the meeting, because that's really hard to do. And again, it sounds counterintuitive. I'm guessing that a lot of folks who are hearing this are thinking, but wait a sec, saying yes makes people happier, makes people want to work with me, or think makes, gives me that immediate dopamine hit of positivity. But when you're thinking longer term, and it doesn't even sound like it was that long, it sounds like maybe even in that meeting, you start building credibility. That's pretty fascinating. Okay, I love this story.
I mean,
Please
I had to
continue.
deliver. I think I probably
Oh, yeah.
laid some of the groundwork by even saying, like, I'm not going to say yes to all these things. But yes, we
Mhm.
absolutely had to deliver the things that we said we are going to do no matter what. And saying no is so hard. I see the comment in the chat. Like, it is so hard to say no. And years ago, if this would have happened to me 10 years ago, there's no way I could have walked into that room and done this. I would have just been like, yep, we'll do it all. And then we wouldn't have delivered it all. Quite honestly, we wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't possible. So this is what I want to share, some of these lessons that I've learned. And I will say too, a lot of this is actually adapted. So about, I guess it was about 13 years ago, I was at Grace Hopper and I heard Patty Azzarello speak. And I've read several of her books since then. Like, it was a game changer. And so a lot of this ruthless prioritization, even the terminology, comes from her. So I will say, we'll share some of this today. And then if you want to dive in deeper, I can throw a couple book recommendations in, because she's the one that helped shift my mindset on how to do this. And then it took me time to build confidence in my own abilities to apply it and do it. But now it's become a natural part of the way I approach things. So, and that's, I think, the big thing is, like, if you want to show up as a leader, you have to learn to prioritize. So whether that's your individual work, or if you're a manager, the work of your team. And when I use the term leader today, well, actually, as we use the term leader in all of our sessions, we're not talking about managers. You don't have to manage people to be a leader, right? If our world had infinite time and resources, we wouldn't need leaders. We would just have workers and a couple of managers, directing the work. So leaders are about looking at the work. Your boss wants you not to just say, "Oh yeah, I'll do all the work that I'll give you." Believe it or not, that probably sounds super counterintuitive as well. Of course, my boss wants me to do all of the work that I hate him. But, like, your boss wants you to think about that work. Mm-hmm. They expect you to analyze, assess, and think about the business, recommend the priorities, improve the way to do the work, and deliver the most important things. Because when I assign a project to somebody on my team, I don't know all the ins and outs of the project. A lot of times, I know about this much, and I'm like, well, this is the outcome we're looking for. I have no idea how we're going to get there. That's your job, but that's where I need the team to come back and say, okay, hold on. Let us go do some analysis. This is feasible. This is feasible. This is not. We should think about this. I mean, that's why I have a team and why I need all of those people. So to be a leader, right? It's about you finding a way to be effective when that workload feels impossible and there are no obvious solutions. Being a leader also means that you make a bigger difference collaboratively than you can alone. And I'll let you think about that one too, because sometimes you saying no to something means there's going to be trade-offs in other work that's happening. So you have to think about, how can you collaboratively get things done? So prioritization, one of the most important strategies of being a leader and moving forward in your career. And I love the comment that someone just made in the chat. Leadership is a way of thinking and being, not an org chart. 100%. Every individual does have the opportunity to show leadership. And that's exactly by being able to ruthlessly prioritize your workload, by able to have those conversations with your boss. And we're going to talk through some of those today. You will show up as a leader. So if you
Jen.
can't, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted. Do you want to finish your sentence?
I was just going to say, yeah, if you can't ruthlessly prioritize and focus on the important things, you will never be seen as a leader.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect segue into a question that we got. I'm not sure if I'm going to mispronounce Raki. Wrote, there are times when you work with external partners and success or impact happens when they adopt your work or recommendations, which could take months and sometimes years. How do you show measurable impact in these scenarios? And my initial reaction when I read that is making sure that your leadership chain knows your priorities. Like, you have to start there before you're able to extend that to external partners and success and impact. What else would you add to that, Jen?
I think the other thing that's important, and it's really easy in a lot of companies, because you only do reviews once a year or twice a year, right? And a lot of times then your view is limited to what happened in the last 6 months or what happened in the last 12 months. If you're working closely with these partners over the course of time, it's keeping an eye on that, because you can always bring it back up. Hey, remember that work that I did 2 years ago? Because we had to lay the groundwork. We built out that foundation. We made these recommendations, and look what they did now. So it's more of setting a reminder for yourself to check back in. Or if you're already working with those customers, it's just bringing it back, almost like a callback to say, I did this thing and yeah, the impact didn't happen for a while. When you're planning to do the thing up front, you can talk about what you think the impact is going to be, why you're focusing in those areas. If I do this, if I establish these best practices or these recommendations, we foresee that the customer will become more efficient, or we foresee that they'll actually subscribe to more services and it'll result in more revenue. We won't know the actual results for a little while, but this is where we're going. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into like how do you articulate business value to your boss when you are trying to focus on your priorities. Um, so what are some of the things that we tell ourselves that hold us back from ruthless prioritization? And I think we already touched on a couple of these, but really, what stops us from building that reputation for focus, for not doing all of the things, but rather doing the most critical things that drive that impact for the business? So the first myth is people won't like or respect me if I say no.
Mm-hmm. I think for and knowing that our audience is dominantly women and possibly not primarily, or possibly folks are hearing this and having a thought that, well, I just want to be likable, which I think does tend to happen more often with women. When Jen and I were chatting about this, we talked about how it's respect or like here. And it could be respect and like, but I think that's a really important thing to recognize about yourself. If your primary goal is to be liked, and asking yourself, okay, I think saying yes means more people will like me. Try this on for size. Just try it out to yourself and think to yourself, if I say no and then deliver what I can say yes to, would I be more respected? Would I be more liked? And then to Jen's first point, I think, would I feel a little bit more in control and sane?
And when you focus on your ruthless priorities, you focus your time and energy on those most important things for the business. And when you succeed with those things that have that significant impact, you increase your value to the organization. So you
Yeah.
become liked, or at least you become credible. I mean, sometimes people aren't going to like us no matter what, right? But at least you
Yeah.
become credible. You start to build that reputation for being known for delivering value. So, yeah, I love that somebody commented in the chat. Well, they still might not like me, exactly, but they might end up respecting me. That's
Yeah.
exactly. The second myth we tend to tell ourselves: I need permission to say no. And remember, everyone faces an impossible workload from time to time. No one can do it all. Being a leader is about rising above that chaos, and no one's going to give you permission to do that. We are all the source of our own time. Our time comes from what we choose to say yes and what we choose to say no to. So if you want more time to do other things, you have to learn to say yes and no differently. You are the one that has to do something different if you want a better strategy for getting things done. That again goes back to being a leader.
Hey, Jen, Anna posted a really interesting, thought-provoking, and interesting comment about I find like or respect is less an issue than disengagement for me and my team. If I say no today, the team I say no to will disengage now and be harder to engage with in the future.
So let's talk about how you say it. We'll get into this in a few minutes, how you say no with credibility. Because there's a way, I shouldn't say a little, there is definitely an art to saying no, and in a way that hopefully will not disengage them because
This
it'll build some credibility.
As well as I just want to build on that because Jenny posted about not worried about being not liked, but I am concerned about saying no. If I say no a lot, will make people think I'm not collaborative. So, yep, to Jen's point, we will jump into that because I think it's a valid and real worry. Will teams or people disengage? Will they go around me? Will they say, "Oh, I don't want to work with Jen anymore. She's so not collaborative." What we want to build the framework here is how do we make sure that you are seen as collaborative and credible, that people know to come to you because you do get things done and you get the right things done? And also, how will this help your career? I've been circling back to that because I've been thinking a lot about women in career this week. And I think one of the things that's so important is that sort of what got you here won't get you there. And one of the things that holds me back is thinking these various myths that we cover and all of the things that you're posting too. Will people think I'm not collaborative? Will people not want to work with me in the future if I say no to this? So these are great, great thoughts to
Yeah.
bring up.
And this is where we'll get into a little bit of the art of saying no to build credibility. So I want to get through a few more myths before we dive into that. So myth number 3, I've got 5 total here. Myth number 3, everything is important. And I think somebody had actually put a similar comment about this farther up in the thread, too many P zeros, right? When everything is important, nothing is important. So this is where you have to get ruthless. This is where the word ruthless comes in. To distinguish between what's important and what's a ruthless priority, one of the questions you can ask yourself, and I'll get more into this as we get into the 5 steps that we're going to talk about, is how bad is it if we fail? Because there's a lot of stuff that'll be piled on your list. But how bad is it if we fail? When you start asking that, you should see a theme emerge, right? And that'll help you then start to figure out what truly is a ruthless priority and you don't want to put at risk. It's not the only question you can ask, but that, for me at least, is one of my first questions. Is like, how bad is this if I say no? Or how bad is this if we fail? The 4th myth, I can't say no. And this goes back to, we were talking a little bit about this. No, when you say no the right way, it can be very difficult to argue with you. You want to say no in a way that leaves people in awe. So we'll talk about those strategies, right? But you don't want to get blamed for blocking others' people work. This goes back to, the 49 priorities that we had, and I had to say no to almost half of them, right? But part of this is you want people to be able to say, I didn't realize this was the trade-off. This was really hard. By helping them understand those trade-offs, it'll help make the difference too. Because a lot of times people don't know. They don't know. And then the last myth, and I think this is the one that in some ways was hardest for me to overcome. I'm letting everyone down if I say no. And the thing that I had to do was I had to take a step back. If I am feeling guilty, or if I start to feel guilty, I have to ask, where does that come from? Is it actual feedback that someone gave me that they're disappointed? Or is it self-inflicted guilt? I have a lot of that.
I know which one.
A lot of that. It's like, oh, but I'll let them down.
Yeah.
So you have to be fair to yourself what's humanly possible, right? It's about making those trade-offs. And sometimes it's not just no, right? Or only no. It can mean saying, I can do this later, or I can do less of this, and explaining why. Smaller scope. Doing everything is the lazy way of working, because saying yes to everything, although it's absolutely exhausting, it isn't hard. Easy to say yes to everything. It doesn't require leadership. So the bottom line is you need to be ruthlessly focused, do the things that have that most significant outcome, do not let anything put them at risk, and make sure to defend your time to get it done. So it's not that you will never get to all of the things, right? But it's not that you won't do some of those other things at later in time. It's just that what you're saying with ruthless prioritization is that you're going to deliver those top 2 no matter what. Pick one, do it, then on to the next, right? Build that reputation of getting significant things done amidst the chaos. So I'm going to, go ahead. I was going to say, I'm going to pull up some slides here.
Yeah, while you're doing that, when you said chaos, my mind snapped straight out of this session and back to work, because I'm working in an AI area right now, and it's just very, very intense. I realize I'm now trying to skirt around using the word chaotic because I know this is being recorded. So I'm just going to say it's really intense and there's quite a lot of it. And that everything, everywhere, all at once could possibly be the org motto.
So let's break down we've been talking about the myths. I keep saying, hey, we're going to talk about steps. Let's break this down into 5 practical steps on how to prioritize. Or if you want to reframe that, how to say no in a way that builds credibility. So 5 steps to ruthless prioritization, or 5 steps to say no to build credibility. So the 5 steps that we're going to get into, the first one, and I'll go into all of these in detail, is to catch everything. The second one is then to take all the things you've caught, determine your ruthless priorities. The third thing is to get buy-in. The fourth thing then is to communicate and set expectations. This is where some of that alignment comes in. This is where some of that messaging, especially when you've got other teams you're working across that want things from you. And then the fifth thing, of course, is to actually create a realistic workload and deliver. I think a lot of these steps are equally important. So these are in order of like sequence, not necessarily importance.
You know, Jen, one thing before we jump into this, because I think that it is a great question or scenario around the catch everything, which we're just going to dive into, is that Wandy had mentioned when I tried to focus and deliver the most important and impactful, I got questioned that I don't have enough throughput for promotion. And now I'm back to the position to take a lot of work items. So I want to call that out and weave that into what we're going to talk about now, because I'm guessing that uh, I'm not guessing. I know that that is a scenario that does happen to some of us. And I think that it really calls out one of the challenges that we worry about. It feels like it's a bundle of not getting respect, not getting liked, not being considered enough, not having building that reputation and that credibility. So we're going to weave that into our answers here, Wandy, just so you know that. And I'm sorry you didn't get the promotion. It's a super frustrating experience.
And that's where I can't guarantee that these 5 steps are going to get you to promo. That's not, I just want to be clear. I'm
Yeah.
not saying
Yeah,
that,
thank you.
but
Thank you.
hopefully they will set you up for the long-term success, right? Because the more that you can focus on things that truly are impactful for the business, the easier it'll become to articulate that impact, especially if you follow some of these steps that have to do with, making sure you've got that clear buy-in, making sure you're communicating and setting the expectations and then delivering. It'll become more, what the things you're doing will become more visible as well, which we did a session, was our last session actually, on shining a light on your accomplishments.
Oh,
We talked about how
yeah.
to do this. So we can drop the link in later. It's out on our YouTube channel, but we did talk about how do you elevate some of those. Some of this will set up the groundwork for being able to drive that impact so that you can highlight those accomplishments. So first step in saying no in a way that helps you build credibility is to catch everything. Now you're probably like, wait a second. She just said don't
You
do
just
everything.
said the opposite, Jen.
No. I didn't say do everything. I said don't drop everything. So catch everything is the idea of don't dropping. Don't do everything. Just don't drop anything. So you do this by making and keeping a list. If you don't create a list, it's going to be a lot more stressful to keep track of. So this is where highly, highly recommend you create a list. It does not have to look like the one I've got on the screen. This is just one way that you can go about doing it. But I would encourage you to start this list if you don't already have something like this, and think about who requested the thing that they want you to do, right? When did they ask for it? What is the task and what is the desired outcome? Have you gotten clear on what the goal or the objective is of the work that's coming from, whether it's your boss or a cross-functional team or a customer, if you're working closely with customers, do you know? Do you know who they requested, when it was, the task, and desired outcome? Just get into the habit of capturing these things. We're going to workshop for a couple of minutes here. I know this is not a lot of time. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. And I want you just to start thinking about what are the initial things that come to mind that you've already been asked to do. If you already have a list, great, pull it out, consider whether you've captured these things. And if you don't have a list yet, then at least start jotting down some things, and you can go back and fill in the details later, but at least start jotting down some things that you may have recently been asked to do or that are sitting on your plate. Before I dive into step two, there were some questions in the chat about tools that you could use for this list. So I know some people have used SharePoint lists because you can customize those. Some people use Excel or Word. I think Naomi uses OneNote. She has also used ADO, Azure DevOps, since that's a tool that her team uses. I personally use Microsoft To Do to track all of the things. And I just have a way of titling or coding things so that I can keep in mind. A tip for those of you looking at to do, you can use hashtags. So like I'll include my task name and then I might hashtag it with who asked or what team asked or kind of where it's coming from. And then some other stuff that I use for my own prioritization. And you can search within to do for hashtags. There's actually a pretty robust search feature. So um, Microsoft To Do is what it's called. So I will admit I first discovered it when I came to Microsoft 4.5 years ago, and now it runs my personal life as well as my professional life. So everything for me is in To Do. Um, all right. So you've started by catching everything. I mean, I know you didn't catch everything in 3 minutes, but that's where you've started. The second step in saying no in a way that helps you build credibility is to determine your ruthless priorities. So this is about thinking before you work. You want to look at all of the list of all of the things you've been asked to do, all the things you've captured. Which ones are ruthless priorities? So these are the things that if you focus and deliver, they will drive the most impact for the business. So in determining which ones are most critical and align with impact opportunities for your business, there's a couple things you can consider. First is, what are your organization's current goals? Think through the business needs and priorities. If you're not sure what those are, go talk to your boss. Make sure you understand that before you start to do any sort of prioritization. And this is something where sometimes organizations' goals can change very rapidly just based on things that might be happening in the business. So if you're like, well, it was this, last quarter, but I should probably go verify before I make any assumptions. It's always good just to have that conversation. Having that conversation with your boss also shows that you're engaged and paying attention. So, um, so think through those business needs, have that conversation. The next thing you do is look at all those items on your list and ask that question that I mentioned earlier. What happens if we fail? Naomi?
Yeah, before we jump to that next point, I just want to say this is one of those things that answers a couple of questions that I saw in the chat, at least for me. It answers the question of how do you think about external or partners that aren't on the same work impact and success as you're thinking about. And it also means that you get your managers or bosses tie-in and, or pardon me, buy-in, which when Wandy had posted her question, that was something that popped to mind is if you've got your manager's buy-in and you're having these really clear conversations, one, it typically impresses her. And two, it helps make sure that you are on the same page so that when the conversation does come around to if you get bonuses or promotions or things like that at your job, it helps you really get a better sense of that of, oh, okay, my manager knows what I'm working on. If it helps you feel more comfortable doing a follow-up to that conversation with just reminding you or reiterating or just capturing, here's what we talked about. Here's the current goal. We understand the risks, and here is what I'm focused on. Getting that buy-in is typically a great step, one, to getting recognition, and two, to making sure that you're not surprised or disappointed later on when they come back and say, hey, wait, where's this coming from? It's not foolproof. I've certainly had managers where I've done this, and then 6 months later they say, wait, that wasn't it. It really has helped me and our relationship, my relationship with my manager to say, oh, I based it on this. Not accusatory, just, they're human too. Maybe they forgot. But this really helps drive the alignment in a very powerful way.
And I'll get into a little bit more on the buy-in and the alignment here in a minute as well. Um, so as I was saying, so look at your list. What happens if we fail? That's another one that can help you focus on the stakes that might be critical. What is the business value of each one, right? Is this solving a customer problem? Will it help them adopt or deploy a product? Will it make them more productive? Will it improve a pain point they have? Optimize their ecosystem? Think through some of those things. What's the potential reach or volume? So, how many customers or stakeholders could this work impact? Another question to think about is, will this work help internal business stakeholders achieve their goals? Some of us work more closely with internal customers than external customers. And so think about, could it increase product adoption or acquire more customers by creating this, even if it's an internal tool? Could it lead to customer retention or increased revenue for another team? Does it address a competitive advantage? Does it improve an internal pain point or process that can be a total cost of doing business, right? It could be a drag on that. And kind of related to that, is this work creating operational excellence? Could it reduce costs, churn, or friction? Will it improve productivity? Does it make it easier to generate or collect revenue? Improve the data coherence or reporting? Sometimes just being able to track information can be a huge win, right? Lay that foundation for the longer term needs of the business. So I know I'm going through these really quickly, but this is being recorded, so you can come back and re-listen
And the
to
deck
it.
will be shared too.
So yeah, we'll share the slides. So these are all some things to be thinking about, right? And really getting good at that business value. And helping this will not only, or evaluating this, I should say, not only helps you decide which of the items on your list to be ruthless priority, but then it's going to help you sell it to your boss. So that's the next step conversation to have that buy-in. As you narrow in on these ruthless priorities, you also want to consider what you're going to do with everything else on your list. Some of this stuff, what will you outright say no to? Just, nope, totally not a priority. What might you say later? I can make that a priority later. Or less to. I could do it, but I'm going to do it in lesser scope. The other thing you should consider as you're going through your list is, who do you need to communicate your decisions to? So I'm going to move forward. That third step to say no in a way that builds credibility is to get buy-in. So as I mentioned earlier, boss needs your help, thinking about the work. So you got to have a conversation with them. You want to align and get buy-in on the things that you need to make sure you get done, no matter what. Don't just not do something.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of the worst. That is the complete antithesis of credibility and yeah, that's the worst.
So you want to help your boss and other stakeholders understand what your ruthless priorities are and what the business value is that makes them ruthless. So make
Yes.
sure those are the things that are driving the impact for the business. Your goal is to get buy-in that these tasks are the ruthless priorities and that your boss will help you protect your time so that you can get them accomplished. Put forth a plan for the ruthless priorities that you're going to finish. Another tip for when working with your boss and key stakeholders, don't volunteer for failure. And I'm saying this because it's important to show what things cost. Create and recommend ways to work more effectively or faster. So just a really quick example. I went to someone on my team because I was looking for some data and I thought, they can pull it in like an hour. No big deal, right? They came back to me and they said, well, for me to do that, it's actually going to take me about 8 hours to find all of the information that you're looking for. So I said, don't do that. What can you give me in an hour? And we found a compromise so that I was able to get the information I needed for a leadership team meeting and the employee didn't spend 8 hours. I am really, really glad that we had that conversation because otherwise they would have spent 8 hours. And I didn't want that, but I didn't know. So that's why I'm saying sometimes you got to educate what the actual cost is.
Hmm.
Be realistic about it, but educate, right?
Hey, Jen,
Uh,
is there supposed to be a script on this slide? Because if so, it's
so
not showing up.
it's going to in just a second here.
I love how I just jump ahead and I'm like, come on, Jen, let's go, let's go, let's go.
So here's one way that you can have the conversation. Based on my understanding of the business needs and strategy of these 15 things, I think these two need to be done first. I would suggest that I set those as ruthless priorities. This other stuff, I could keep doing on a lower level in the background, work on it as I get to it. But I am going to make sure I finish these two things first, no matter what. Right? And you can say, and I'm doing it because of the business value. Also, here's some other things you asked me for a month or two ago. I actually just recently did this with my boss because I have my catch list. And I said, I don't think these are relevant anymore. Some stuff has changed. What do you think? I recommend we take them off the list. Guess what? I got to take them off my list because I had kept them on my list and I knew and I had deprioritized and things have changed. So this is one way that you can approach this. Step 4 in saying no in a way that helps you build credibility is to communicate and set expectations. So they say the best defense is an offense. In this case, proactively setting expectations with others. So this a lot of times is the people that have asked you for all the things. It's those horizontal partners. It's those other teams that you're like, if I say no, they're going to think I'm not collaborative. They don't want to work with me, right? Once you've got your ruthless priorities set, you've got your buy-in from your boss, and you know what you're going to do with those requests that they came to you with, you know, the not now or the laters, the lesser scope or the no, then you go back and you talk to your primary stakeholders. It is always more powerful to talk about what you're doing versus what you can't do or what you're not doing. Sell the business value of your ruthless priorities and why it's critical to the business that you focus on delivering those areas no matter what. So keep people in the loop so they know where their request fits in as well. This can actually buy you a lot of breathing room. If you can explain why your ruthless priorities are truly important to the business and need to come first, they're gonna get it. They'll realize their request is in the context of something that is so important to the business. Go back to the story that I told at the very beginning. So about 2 months after that, the leadership team comes to me and they're like, hey, we need program manager support for this other thing. I immediately was able to say, well, actually, the vendor budget that we had to cut last month was to do this kind of work. So we do not have resources for it. If we all agree that it should be prioritized, then we have to decide which of the other committed items that we had already aligned on as a group will be prioritized to not get done. Or we have to think about a different way. Guess what? The request got dropped immediately because we'd already had the conversation about the 20 things that we said we were going to do, and everybody knew that we had to do those top priorities for the team. So this also makes it easier for you when other stuff comes in. So new stuff comes in. Each new priority potential change comes in your list. Examine it. Ask, how does it fit with other things? Is it duplicative, equally important? Is it a blocker? You know, when you're very clear about your conversations on your ruthless priorities and why they're important, it makes it a lot easier to have conversations like this. So I'm working on this now. I think you'll agree that it's super critical important, as we talked about. I'll put your thing on the list to do later. Or I can do your thing with less scope. That'll ensure that I don't jeopardize the business because I've got to get this other thing done. One other thing to remember is that sometimes you don't have to proactively communicate about the status of an item, but you want to be able to when asked. So you don't necessarily have to go out and tell them up front, but keep track. So then when you get asked, you've got your catch list and you can say, oh, by the way, this is what's going on. So make sure that you have a way to track that list and follow up. Very last step in saying no. This is probably the most obvious one, but it's just as critical, is you got to get realistic about the workload so you can deliver. So block out your time on your calendar. Make sure that you can finish delivering on those ruthless things. I think, and then after you do that with your ruthless priorities, you can figure out how much time is left for the stuff on your list. That'll help guide conversations about what you can and you can't do from the rest of that list. Make sure you plan to review this list regularly, right? Go back in every couple of weeks. Are you spending your time the way you thought you would? You blocked your calendar. Is it actually working? Is there stuff there that you need to revisit? You could delegate or remove to give more time to your ruthless priorities, right? So just some things to think through. And that is the 5 steps. I know that was a lot in a short amount of time. But hopefully, and like I said, we'll share the slides so that you can go back and follow through these. Mm-hmm. I think the key thing to remember with all of this too is taking on this approach, super nerve-wracking, right? Yes. Oh, saying no can cause a lot of anxiety. Just the idea of it. I'm sweating right now because I've been talking about saying no. But it makes us nervous, right? Like knowing that you can't please everyone. And in fact, sometimes you're going to please very few people. It's stressful.
But you want to please the right people. And this goes back to all the questions that we've got about external partners and managers and bosses and different things. You want to please the right people, and you want your work to matter. All of you, and for everyone who's here today, I'm guessing that you're already sort of committed to, I know it's going to be nerve-wracking to make some changes. I know it's going to be nerve-wracking to grow, but I want to, either for my personal or my professional or my career growth. That's why you're here today, I'm guessing.
We hope that's part of
We
why
hope.
you're here, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but that's the whole thing is being a leader, being able to communicate clearly. Part of it means you got to be brave and reinvent yourself a little bit because you're going to sit with some of this discomfort of the things that I said today.
Mhm.
You can do it though. You know, you have to think to yourself, I need to create a doable workload for myself
Yeah.
and my team that has the highest value stuff, right? I need to propose that. I need to negotiate that. I need to own and making it happen.
I'm going to say your future self will thank you if you start thinking about it that way in so
I mean,
many
it
different ways.
took me probably 7 years to really like from when I first heard this concept and getting used to it and starting to do it, like it probably took me 7 years to get comfortable. But now I have a reputation for my team getting things done. And I say no a lot. I say no a lot. But it's okay. It's okay because we're getting the things done that are most critical for the business.
Yeah. It's not an overnight journey, to Jen's point, and at the same time, you do have to start somewhere. So, Jen, we're at time. So,
Yep, that's all I had. So thank you everybody for joining us today and hopefully you've got something that you can put into action as you go.
yeah, we really hope if you want to put anything into the chat that you want to put into action, I know it's a sense of bravery. It also helps commit when you start posting. And this is the nicest group. We have such lovely people who attend. So I would say you'll get lots of support and enthusiasm if you want to do so.
All right. Thank you everyone.
Thanks, folks.